My name is Dorothy Kessler. I'm 66 years old, and on the day of my husband's funeral, while I was still standing in a black dress shaking strangers' hands, my daughter sold his truck. She didn't ask me. She didn't even tell me until it was already gone. What happened 4 days later, when the man who bought that truck showed up at my front door holding something my daughter never knew was inside it, is the reason my family hasn't been the same since. My husband, Walter, and I were married 42 years. He drove that truck, a 1998 Ford, dented and faded blue, every single day of our marriage, to work, to church, to the hardware store on Saturdays. It wasn't valuable. It wasn't beautiful. But it was the last thing of his that still smelled like him, and everyone in my family knew that, including my daughter, Kaylee. Kaylee is 34, sharp with money, always the one who handles things when the family falls apart. After Walter's heart attack, she took charge of the funeral arrangements, the paperwork, the calls to the bank. I was grateful at first because grief had turned my mind into fog and I couldn't string 2 sentences together without crying. The specific detail that should have warned me came the night before the funeral. Kaylee mentioned, almost in passing, while going through Walter's file cabinet, that the truck was just going to sit there depreciating, and that she'd already gotten a few calls about it from a used car lot near her apartment. I didn't think much of it. I assumed she meant someday, eventually, once I was ready. I didn't realize eventually meant the day we buried him. The funeral was on a Thursday. I remember standing in the receiving line at the funeral home, my feet aching in shoes I hadn't worn in years, accepting condolences from people whose names I could barely hold on to through the fog of grief. Kaylee slipped out during the reception. I noticed she was gone for almost 40 minutes, but I assumed she'd stepped out to take a work call, the way she often did. She came back in, sat beside me, and squeezed my hand. "Mom, I need to tell you something before someone else does," she said. "I sold Dad's truck this morning. A buyer came by the house while everyone was getting ready. I got you $1,100 for it. It's already in your account." I stared at her. "Today? You sold it today?" "Mom, it was just sitting there. You weren't going to drive it. I figured it was one less thing for you to deal with while you're grieving." "That truck was your father's." "It was a truck, Mom. It wasn't him." Her voice had that clipped, efficient tone she used at work, the one that didn't leave room for argument. "I handled it so you wouldn't have to. You're welcome." I didn't yell. I didn't even correct her. I just nodded, quietly, and let the rest of the reception pass in a blur, while somewhere across town, a stranger was already driving away in the last place my husband's hands had ever rested. If you've ever had someone dismiss something that mattered to you, sell it right out from under you and call it a favor, drop a comment. I want to know I'm not the only one this has happened to. For 3 days, I didn't say much of anything. I sat in the quiet of a house that no longer had Walter's boots by the door or his truck in the driveway. And I told myself Kaylee meant well, even if the timing broke something in me I couldn't quite name. On the 4th day, my phone rang from a number I didn't recognize. "Mrs. Kessler, my name is Daniel Ruiz. I bought your husband's truck a few days ago." My stomach tightened. "Yes?" "I was cleaning it out this weekend, getting ready to sell it myself, actually. And I found something behind the bench seat, wedged down in the springs. I think it belongs to you." "What is it?" He hesitated. "It's an envelope. It's got your name on it. And there's something else. A folded document, looks old, with a stamp on it. I didn't want to just throw it away." An envelope with my name on it, hidden behind the seat of a truck my husband drove every day for 26 years. Walter never hid things from me. Not once, in 42 years. So why would there be something addressed to me, tucked where only he would have known to put it. And what, exactly, had he been keeping there all this time? I couldn't tell Kaylee about the call. Not yet. If I confronted her before I understood what Walter had left behind, she'd find a way to make it about the truck being just a truck all over again. And I needed to know what I was actually holding on to before that conversation happened. So I asked Daniel Ruiz to meet me, not at my house, but at the diner 2 blocks from where Walter used to get his oil changed. A place that felt neutral, safe. He arrived on the following Tuesday, June 9th, carrying a manila envelope with my name written across it in Walter's unmistakable handwriting. Inside was a folded document, an old insurance policy, decades old, with a writer I didn't recognize, and a separate, smaller note in Walter's own hand. D, if anything happens to me, don't let anyone talk you out of what's in the safe deposit box. It's yours. Always was. W. A safe deposit box. In 42 years of marriage, Walter had never once mentioned a safe deposit box. I called my sister-in-law, Carol, Walter's older sister, who still lived 2 towns over, and remembered things about Walter that even I sometimes forgot. She went quiet on the phone when I read her the note. Dorothy, she said slowly. Walter opened a box at First Union back in 2003, right after his brother passed. He never told you? I told her no, not a word. He was strange about it, Carol said. He told me once it was insurance in case things ever got complicated with Kaylee. I didn't understand what he meant at the time. I still don't. I took the note and the old policy to an estate attorney named Grace Munoz, recommended by a woman from my church whose husband had passed the year before. Grace looked over everything for nearly 15 minutes without saying a word. Mrs. Kessler, she finally said, do you know if this box is still active? I told her I didn't even know it existed until 4 days ago. We'll find out, she said. But if this policy writer is what I think it is, your husband may have quietly protected something specific for you, separate from anything in his will, separate from anything your daughter would have had access to. If you're the person who quietly digs for the truth in your own family too, who doesn't yell, doesn't accuse, just goes and finds the paperwork, hit subscribe. This channel is for people like us. Grace's investigation took 8 days. She confirmed the safe deposit box was still active, still under Walter's name, with me listed as the sole secondary key holder. A fact I had never once been told in 23 years. On June 17th, Grace and I sat across from a bank officer while they opened the box. Inside was a second insurance policy, one Walter had taken out privately in 2003, naming me as the sole beneficiary, entirely separate from our joint accounts and completely untouched by any paperwork Kaylee had handled around the funeral. The policy had a death benefit of $340,000. But the real twist wasn't the number, it was the reason. Grace pulled a rider attached to the policy, dated the same year. That explained everything. Back in 2003, Kaylee, then a teenager, had asked her father, in front of witnesses at a family gathering, why he bothered keeping that ugly old truck instead of trading it in for something nicer, and joked that when he died, she'd get rid of it the same day. Walter had laughed it off in the moment, but 2 weeks later, he opened that box, took out that policy, and wrote the note that would end up wedged behind a truck seat for 23 years, waiting for exactly the moment that had just happened. He hadn't been paranoid. He had been listening. The dismissal at the funeral reception, "It was just a truck, Mom, it wasn't him," wasn't ignorance. It was an echo of the exact words Walter had heard from her 23 years earlier, and he'd quietly built a safeguard around them before I ever understood I might need one. I invited Kaylee over the following Sunday. I sat her down at the kitchen table, in the chair her father used to sit in, and I placed the note in front of her. Do you remember telling your father, when you were 16, that you'd get rid of his truck the day he died? Her face drained of color. Mom, that was a joke. I was a teenager. He remembered it for 23 years, I said. He put it in writing. I didn't know about any of this. I know you didn't, I said, calm, my voice not rising once. That's exactly the point. He protected something from you before you ever knew there was anything to protect. That's not fair. You sold his truck on the day of his funeral without asking me, I said. I'm not trying to punish you, Kaylee. I'm telling you why I'm going to start making my own decisions from here on out, without checking whether they're convenient for you first. She didn't argue with that. For the first time in a long time, she didn't have a quick, efficient answer ready. Kaylee and I are speaking again, though carefully, and mostly about small things. The weather, her job, her plans for the fall. We haven't talked about the truck since that Sunday, and I don't think we need to. Some conversations end simply by both people knowing where they stand now. What stays with me isn't the money. It's realizing my husband spent over 2 decades quietly protecting me from a version of cruelty he saw coming long before I ever did. And I almost never knew. Thank you for sitting with my story today. If someone in your life has ever dismissed something that mattered to you as just a thing, I'd like to hear how you handled it. If this story meant something to you, like it, subscribe for more, and tell me in the comments, what would you have said to Kaylee at that kitchen table?